In 1976, a man sold his share of a company for $800. $800. That company is now worth over $3 trillion. His name is Ronald Wayne, and almost nobody knows it. Not because he was erased, not because he was cheated, but because he chose to walk away. He was there at the very beginning, the third man in the room, the third signature on the page, the third founder of Apple Computer Company. 1/3 of a company that would change the world. And he gave it up. Steve Jobs became a legend. Steve Wozniak became a hero. Ronald Wayne became a footnote. But here is what nobody tells you about Ronald Wayne. He wasn't stupid. He wasn't naive. He wasn't tricked. He was afraid. And in that fear, in one single quiet, rational decision, he made what many now call the most expensive mistake in human history. This is his story.
It is early 1976. A garage in Los Altos, California. Two young men with a dream and no discipline. Steve Jobs is 21 years old, brilliant, obsessive, magnetic, and completely impossible to manage. Steve Wozniak is 25, a technical genius, maybe one of the greatest engineering minds of the 20th century, but quiet, passive, unbothered by the business side of anything. They needed someone else, someone older, someone grounded, someone who had already lived inside the real world of contracts and commerce and consequence. They found Ronald Wayne. He was 41 years old. He had already started a company, a slot machine manufacturing business, that had failed. He had already felt the cold floor of a dream that didn't work out. But Jobs trusted him. And more importantly, Wayne understood what Jobs and Wozniak were trying to build. So on the first day of April, 1976, April Fool's Day, the three men signed a partnership agreement. Jobs held 45%. Wozniak held 45%. Ronald Wayne held 10%. 10% of Apple. Wayne wasn't just a name on a document. He wrote the original partnership agreement by hand. Precise, legal, professional. He drew the very first Apple logo, a detailed classical illustration of Isaac Newton sitting beneath an apple tree, a ribbon reading Apple Computer Co. curling around the border. He was the adult in the room, the one who made it feel real. And for a brief, shining moment, Ronald Wayne was a founder of Apple. But that moment would not last long. Here is what you need to understand about 1976. Apple was not Apple yet. It was a handshake and a hope. It was two young men in a garage building circuit boards on a table. And partnerships, legal partnerships, are not like stocks in a corporation. In a general partnership, if the company takes on debt, every partner is personally liable. Let that sit for a moment. If Apple failed, if it borrowed money and couldn't pay it back, if Jobs made a deal that collapsed, Ronald Wayne would owe that money. Not from Apple's bank account, from his house, from his car, from everything he owned. Jobs was 21, with nothing to lose. Wozniak had youth and the protection of inexperience. But Ronald Wayne was 41 years old. He had assets. He had a life he had already built. He had already watched one company fall apart beneath him. And he had seen the way Steve Jobs operated. Jobs had already negotiated a deal with a computer retailer named Paul Terrell, the owner of the Byte Shop, for 50 Apple I computers. Jobs had committed to delivering them in 30 days. He had ordered parts on credit. To Wayne, this looked like the beginning of a financial spiral, A young man making promises the company couldn't keep, signing checks the bank might not honor. He became terrified. Not of failure in the abstract, but of ruin. Of personal, financial, total ruin. And so, 12 days after signing that partnership agreement, Ronald Wayne went back to the Santa Clara County Recorder's office. He filed a notarized document. He relinquished his 10% stake in Apple Computer Company. The buyout price was $800. He later received an additional $1,500 as final settlement. Total, $2,300. He walked away. He told himself it was the smart thing to do. He told himself he was being responsible. He told himself he was protecting what he had. He was not wrong to be afraid. He was only wrong about what he was afraid of.
Apple sold 66 Apple I computers to the bike shop. The deal Jobs made, the one that scared Ronald Wayne, worked. Then came the Apple II. Then came the IPO. On December 12, 1980, Apple Computer went public. It was the largest IPO since Ford Motor Company in 1956. $300 million raised in a single day. Overnight, Apple created more millionaires than any company in Silicon Valley history. Jobs became worth $256 million. He was 25 years old. Wozniak became worth $116 million. Ronald Wayne watched from a distance. By 1990, Apple's valuation had crossed $5 billion. By 2000, it had reached $16 billion. By 2012, Apple became the most valuable company in the history of the world. Today, Apple is worth over $3 trillion. $3 trillion. 10% of $3 trillion. $300 billion. For $800. $800. Let's make that real for a moment. If Ronald Wayne had held his 10% through Apple's IPO alone, he would have walked away with over $22 million in 1980. By 1990, his stake would have grown past $500 million. By the time Steve Jobs returned and launched the iMac, the iPod, the iPhone, Wayne's 10% would have made him one of the wealthiest human beings alive. The iPhone alone, a product launched 30 years after he walked away, generated more annual revenue than most countries produce in a year. He missed all of it. Not because of bad luck, not because of betrayal, because of 12 days of fear. 12 days. That is the distance between $800 and $300 billion. So where is Ronald Wayne today? He lives in Pahrump, Nevada, a small, quiet desert town about 60 miles west of Las Vegas. He sells stamps, rare coins and stamps, from a modest home, alone. He has no regrets, or so he says. He has said publicly more than once that he made the right decision for the man he was at the time. And here is the thing. He is not wrong. Ronald Wayne looked at the risk and he made a calculated decision. He chose certainty over chaos, safety over speculation. He chose to protect what he had instead of betting on what could be. That is not stupidity. That is fear wearing the mask of wisdom. Because here is the question that will follow you long after this video ends. How many times have you done the same thing? How many times have you held something, an idea, an opportunity, a risk worth taking, and convinced yourself that walking away was the responsible choice, that you were being smart, that you were protecting yourself, that the timing wasn't right, that you weren't ready, that it was too uncertain? Ronald Wayne was not a foolish man. He was, by every measure, the wisest person in that garage in 1976. And that wisdom cost him everything. The lesson is not take every risk. The lesson is not throw caution away and bet on chaos. The lesson is this: There is a difference between smart caution and fear in disguise. Smart caution says, I don't have enough information yet. Fear says, I have enough information, and it terrifies me, so I will call it wisdom and walk away. Ronald Wayne had enough information. He just couldn't bear the weight of what it meant. Steve Jobs was reckless and brilliant and relentless, and the world remembers his name. Ronald Wayne was careful and rational and afraid, and the world almost forgot his. Both men stood in the same garage. Both men held the same piece of paper. One of them changed the world. One of them sold his place in it for $800. Don't sell your 10%.
Thank you for watching this story on Wealth Persona. If it made you think about money, about trust, about the stories we tell ourselves to feel safe, then it did exactly what it was meant to do. Subscribe so the next story finds you, because there are more stories like this one, and you should know them.